You're listening to episode number 30 of the Play Your Position podcast.
Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count. Here's your host, Mary Lou Kaser. Let's get started.
Kickoff, move the chains, and touchdowns. Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where each week another insightful conversation makes it into the end zone. I'm your host, Mary Lou Kaser, and this is the podcast that features conversations with and about people who show up and play full out each and every day. They are the people you admire: entrepreneurs, writers, artists, musicians, parents, teachers, athletes, adventurers, and their stories give us a glimpse into what it means to be human. My goal for each episode is to inspire you with stories that make you think, introduce you to cool new people, open you up to new ideas, and inspire you to keep playing full out in your life's work in order to make a difference. As always, details about each episode can be found over on the Shownotes page at my website, maryloukaser.com/podcast, where you will find a clickable list of each episode. I am super excited about introducing you to my guest for the show today, Emily Duff. Emily, are you ready for kickoff?
Oh yeah, Mary Lou.
Awesome. Emily Duff is a singer-songwriter who has been writing and playing music for a good long time. She started playing in New York City when she was 17 years old and hasn't slowed down since. She sings all of her own songs and is currently focusing on writing for other artists. Mother of 2 children, Emily makes her home in a very small apartment in the West Village of downtown Manhattan, where she has lived for more than 25 years. Emily, welcome to the show. Let's just get started with you sharing with listeners what position you are playing really well right now. How has this position guided and shaped your life to this point?
Well, to tickle the metaphors a little bit more, I guess I could say that this is the year I went into full-on offense. Perhaps, as an artist, we all have our insecurities and our weak spots, and maybe I was on the defensive and kind of, holding a little bit of a block there and protecting my territory. But this is the year where I decided that, I'm going full on and I'm just running for it. I'm going for it. And the reception to my work has been really positive this year. So right now I'd say I'm in a really aggressive place and just really waking up every day, writing and loving what I'm doing and feeling super comfortable in my skin. It's beautiful so far.
It is. When we find that position that really fits, where it does feel like you get up in the morning and you just get to work. When did you first know or recognize that you were going to become a singer-songwriter?
I think it might have been when I was 4 years old. I was born in Queens, in Flushing, Queens, and my mom always played the guitar, and she always had music going on in the house. And I grew up with amazing, amazing music on the turntable. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Neil Diamond, amazing songwriters and really incredible musicians. So music was going all the time. And at a very young age, my mom taught me how to play 4 chords on the guitar. So I took those 4 chords and I just ran with it. And by the time I was 7 years old, I had surpassed her and I was teaching her new chords. And I think it was when I was 7 years old, I wrote my first song. And coincidentally, it was all about my parents breaking up. It became a real creative outlet for me to express myself amidst times of fear and confusion, which then, as we get older, we go through so many different changes. Music was there to really help me through those hard parts, and when that fear and confusion and frustration turned into teenage anger and rebellion, it just gradually went from folk rock to punk rock. I remember very clearly in 6th grade, I think it must have been 6th grade going into 7th grade. It just all became about punk rock music for me. And that was how I guess I really channeled and it became a creative outlet.
Sure. And you would have been at that time in your life, that was when the punk rock scene was really emerging. You and I are the same age, and for listeners who don't know our connection, we actually went to high school together and are reconnecting now. And it's just so interesting to see how the journey there's been variations and people have gone off in different directions, but at your core, Emily, you really have remained true to who you've always been. At 4 years old, to recognize and feel that sense of this is what I'm going to do, I think is just remarkable and a great testament to self-awareness. And I don't know if it's necessarily something that artists have more of, or if it's innate in all of us, and some people just comes a little bit earlier than others.
I think it has a lot to do with your vital force and your vital energy and the principle of resonance, which is a very musical principle and one of physics as well. That when you feel a specific resonance where you're in tune, the metaphors are just all over the place right now.
It's okay.
So when you feel something that really strikes a chord, here I go again, and you feel like you are an instrument that's in tune, that everything just sort of lines up and you know that you're doing what you were meant to do. When I was 4 years old, I went up to my Uncle Benny and Aunt Doris's apartment, and my Uncle Benny had a mandolin on the floor, and I picked it up and I just started picking out songs. And there was like this spark that went off, and it felt chemical, it felt electrical. And that's exactly what it feels like today. And every single time I pick up my guitar or I start to sing, it's healing, it's cathartic, it's energizing, and it's exciting. It's like falling in love every time. When you hold that in your hands and you've got that in your heart, that synergy and that synchronicity is undeniable. I think you just have to move with it.
It's so true. And I had a guest last year named Carol Ann Jones. I don't know if you know her. She's up in New England, and she's also a singer-songwriter. And she talked about very similar feeling that you just described. And that raw energy, that talent is such a force. And in order for any of us to really become more of who we're meant to be, we need to have coaches and mentors in our lives that can help channel some of that energy, give us a little bit of direction, guide us in the way that they've gone. And so who has been instrumental for you, Emily, and influenced you to play your current position? You mentioned your mom and some of the musicians you heard on the turntable, but who else has really been there to guide and mentor you?
Well, there have been certain influences in my life, most of them being strong female performers that I've looked up to. And one of them you and I already spoke about earlier was Patti Smith. Patti Smith is somebody that really reminded me of myself, and I was able to sort of see a way in through what she was doing in the 70s. I grew up at a time where, I was very attracted to specific kinds of music. And like I said, I went from folk songs or classic rock. It was a very quick switch all of a sudden, I remember, from Leonard Skinner and Molly Hatchet and the Allman Brothers and Led Zeppelin, all of a sudden, to singing Patti Smith songs. And I think Patti Smith, Janis Joplin, Nina Hagen, Chrissie Hynde from The Pretenders was a huge influence on me, somebody who was fronting her own band, writing great songs, instinctively feminine and tough at the same time. But I guess at the core of it was my mother, my grandmother, whom my daughter is named after. These are all people that have had profound influence on me, and many writers. I've always been an avid reader. I adore Eudora Welty. I really like Southern writers. Faulkner. I think it's the American experience that you get out of their writing, and that digs so deep. Bob Dylan. All people that have had huge, huge influence on me. Townes Van Zandt, Steve Earle. And, the interesting thing is that these people that I have looked at as mentors and influences, consequently now, and ironically, most of them live in my neighborhood now. So I see them on the street and in stores all the time. And it's almost like a dream come true, like to go to the, like, you know, your local store to pick up something, and there's one of your musical idols in the store with you, and you say hey, and you greet each other at the local guitar store when you're getting your guitars fixed, and you thank them, and you say, wow, you know, that song really sort of took me somewhere.
And I can't think of a greater compliment as an artist, no matter what your art form is, than to have somebody affirm that what you created meant something. We create because we have to. We were talking about that also in the pre-chat. But once it's out there for the world to do with it as it will, to get some feedback is part of the dynamic. You know, you were talking about physics earlier. Nothing happens in isolation. There really is that two-way street. And a lot of times as artists, we do find ourselves alone. And not that that's bad. It's just every now and then you've got to get out there, and to be able to run into these people who you've looked up to, who have been an influence, is just magnificent. And
I don't even have to go outside the house. You know, it's funny you say that. We're talking about action, reaction, and, you know, I don't have to walk that far to see people who have, or who are currently influencing me, because they're my kids. Mm-hmm. You know, when I really think about it, the songs that I've been writing recently really have so much to do with me as a mother and how my perspective has shifted so profoundly. I have two children, one 6.5 and one 9.5. You know as well as I do what those ages are like, and how bursting with creativity and energy they are, and how those little people in your life test every boundary and every preconceived notion you've ever had about anything. And that they just turn stuff on its head and make you kind of reimagine and reassess 24 hours a day.
Absolutely. Which I think is a great segue into the second part of our conversation, which I call Move the Chains. And people who are fans of football or know about the game of football, you know, that whistle blows, there's kickoff, and then anything can happen within that time frame. And becoming a parent, but particularly becoming a mother, especially when you are an artist, is one of the most, I wouldn't call it being sacked or intercepted, because you can continue your art, but you're suddenly scrambling around on the field because now you're almost having to play two positions. And I would love for you to talk more about a time that you remember when you found yourself playing out of position, Emily, where you just felt like everything was cattywampus, and you know, you were looking around and you had to pivot, you had to make a fast decision. Tell us the story of what caused that to happen, and then how did you come out of it?
Well, I just want to think about language for 1 second, and something that I found to be very interesting was that when I became a parent, I also became invisible in my perception. I said, wow, in order to become a parent, you need to become invisible. Isn't that ironic? You need to sort of go away for a little while and forget who you are. And I have kind of a strong personality, and talk about, you know, being thrown off balance. Mm-hmm. Yes, I could probably list about 100 instances from the very beginning. You know, I had planned this incredible. I have my hands on the controls a lot in life, and I've always been very meticulous and organized. And my pregnancies were great. I loved them both. And I always say that, you know, hormonally I was just clicking, and I wish I could be pregnant in that state at all times. It was just such a happy time. But just starting from labor and delivery, everything went completely off kilter because it wasn't anything that I planned in both instances. And that knocked me for a loop. And I reluctantly had to change my game plan. Wound up having C-sections when, you know, I'm this natural girl, and, you know, I'm going to have my babies this way. And with Sylvia, I was in labor for over 40 hours. and finally wound up with a C-section. So then with my son, I was planning on a VBAC and wound up falling at 36 weeks. I was in a store and there were grapes on the floor that I didn't see. And I slipped grapes and went flying up in the air and landed on my back on a marble floor at 36 weeks pregnant and went right into labor.
Oh, wow.
So here I go again, talk about unplanned and change your strategy. I'm 4 weeks early and there I go, like right back into the C-section scenario, so ever since then, I've been on my back foot, to be honest with you. You can't say, there's that old saying of, like man makes plans and God laughs. And having kids, it's like that every day. You think you're going to have something go this way and it goes a different way. I had my kids later in life too. My kids are young and I didn't even meet my husband till I was 35 years old. I had my head down, I was really focused. I was just playing music and thinking that this is just what I wanted to do and kids weren't going to happen. And then I met this man and I knew exactly why people wanted babies. You fall in love with the right person and bang, you want babies. But then everything kind of went nuts. So every single day, I would say, is recalibrating and learning how to do the dance in a different way. It's all a bit of compromise, which has profoundly affected my writing in all good ways. And that's why I think this year I feel so fit and so strong and so ready to get out with all I think I'm writing better than ever. I've got the confidence to be bringing my songs to other artists now. And, planning on going to Europe and touring Europe this summer and doing some local touring around here and then down south. I'm just taking a lot more changes. And I could say that that's probably because I've learned how to take curveballs. I've learned how to get hit and get right back up again. And it doesn't faze me as much as it used to. And I attribute that to being a mom.
That's cool. I've never had anybody share that perspective before, just like that. And I really like that because it speaks to the fact that, you're going to get hit and things are going to not go according to plan. And what are you going to do? Are you just going to fold the tent and, that's it? Or do you readjust? And you did a really nice job of going with it, Well,
you gotta go with it. If you don't go with it, then that resistance is really going to hamper your creative life. And as an artist, we deal with that on a daily basis because, what do we write about? We write about ourselves, because, for all intents and purposes, we are reliable observers. We're there to chronicle. It's what we see, it's what we feel, it's what we do, it's what we hear. It can get awfully narcissistic if you don't sort of step back, maybe take another point of view at some point, write somebody else's story, and become invisible every once in a while, like you have to learn how to do when you become somebody's mom.
That's right. You pass the ball to somebody else. You let other people on the team, and that could be your family, that could be your colleagues, that could be the world family. You give up that hey, I'm in the spotlight, and and that doesn't get people very far because no game is ever won alone.
No, and what I find lately is that people are coming up to me and telling me how accessible my songs are. And lyrically, they're like, wow, I could really put myself in there and it resonates for me. And to me, that's kind of what your goal is.
It is.
For me as a writer, a songwriter, it's not just about me telling a story. It's about other people holding on to that story and making it theirs and making that song become important for them. So if I can do that, then I'm definitely winning the game.
Yeah. And what advice would you give people, Emily, who are out there struggling to either figure out what position they should be playing or how can they make adjustments so that they get the ball into the end zone? Where from your life's journey have you really gained that insight that you would want to pass on?
I'd say the most important things that I've learned are get out of your own way, take chances, and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's kind of a trap that you can get into because as artists, we do tend to create in isolation. And that can get very heavy, So in order to move forward, breaking old habits and changing patterns is very helpful. So if something isn't working, stop banging your head against the wall. Stop trying to make it work. Do something else.
Do you have an example from your own life when you found yourself banging your head against the wall and you made one small shift and everything broke open for you?
Absolutely. I was killing myself on a song. And all of a sudden I went, I'm going to shift the perspective. I'm going to write this from third person point of view. Because I was too deep inside of it. And I couldn't make it work because I was hammering away at it. I was too inside of it. So I stepped back, I wrote it from a third person perspective, and it was like the clouds opened up. And I saw my way into what the real essence of the song was. And it came out and it was great.
I love that because it shows that change doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be the clouds parting and the lightning bolts coming down and some big, fiesta of events. It can be a very simple shift, a very simple point of view change. Like as a writer, it's a great example. And there's so many others from, again, that story is applicable to situations across the gamut. So thank you for sharing that. And I think based on that, it is time that we take the ball into the end zone for a touchdown. So, Emily, you are in the red zone and there are less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You are down by 4 points. It's third down and it is now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you overcame this obstacle and ran the ball into the end zone for a touchdown that won the game for you.
Wow. Whoa, that's heavy. Let me think. Oh, somebody asked me who was, it was kind of like one of those elevator pitch moments where you finally get the audience or the ear of somebody you've been looking to get to, and you're able to talk about who you are and what you do because, I wanted this gig. I wanted to be able to get on this bill at this certain venue. And I had never really had the confidence to talk about myself, I guess, with enough security or with enough, I don't even know how to explain it, that somebody would look at me and go, wow, now I really want to hear what you do. And I did this a few months ago where I was, and I never mix business and pleasure, but I was actually outside in the neighborhood taking my kids to the park and ran into somebody that I wanted to get the ear of. And I walked up to them and I said, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about emailing you, and we know this person and that person. I dropped a few names. I never do that. And I said, I'd like to bring my band over to your club and get a gig. And this person, who I'm not going to say who, said, oh, really? Just tell me what you do. And I full on had 100% confidence in myself. And I laid it all out there and said, oh, yeah, I do this and that. And it's been sounding like this. And he's looked at me and he goes, wow, I'm intrigued. Can you send me some music? And right then and there, I was like, wow, that's it. That's exactly what I had to do. I said, yeah, give me your email address. I'll pass it on. Turned out I wound up getting the gig I wanted. And up until now, I never really would have had the confidence or the guts to just go, hey, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I do. I mean, I've done that to a lesser extent, but I might have been self-deprecating and not really had, all the confidence that I've been carrying around with me lately. And it just worked. And I thought to myself, hey, you know what? You don't try, you don't get anything.
That's right. You went for it, and your heartbeat may have been beaten out of your chest and been a little bit of an adrenaline high, but good for you. Congratulations. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
That's great.
It was one of those situations where it was just like, if you don't do this, you are going to kick yourself tomorrow because you don't know when you're going to get this again. And then, you know how that, you miss an opportunity and then you think to yourself, oh man, I blew it. And that takes you down a few steps, but there's no reason to do that. And I don't see myself doing that sort of thing again. I think I'm basically on that track now where the goals will be kicked.
Yes, that's right. That was a turning point. That was one of those moments where it's a funny thing about life. It's one of those paradoxes that until we actually experience something, we're on the outside of it. To go through the process of asking, which is what you did essentially. When you narrow it down, that's what you did. You just went up and you asked, would it be all right if I sent you some music?
Yep.
And not knowing what the outcome of that particular conversation would be, it could have gone yes or no. In your case, it went yes, which was fabulous. Sometimes it goes no, and that can, pop the balloon, so to speak, for a little bit. But at the end of the day, now you've gone through that, and you realize, hey, I didn't die. I can go do this again if I need to. When I need to, I should say.
Yeah, and fear is really the only thing that stands between us and that goalpost, And my friend Patsy is so funny. She says, fear just stands for forgetting everything's all right.
I love that. I've not heard that one.
Yeah. So every once in a while when I go, oh man, I don't know, it's like, what are you afraid of? And then you kind of think about, oh yeah, that's right. Fear stops me from doing these things that I know I can do. So recognize the fear, realize that everything's cool, and go for it.
That's right.
And that's what I've been doing. You know what? If I can have 2 children, get out of bed every day, live in this tiny little apartment, make things work, be a good person, be kind, be creative, do all that stuff, you know what? There's nothing to be afraid of. There really isn't.
That's right. There isn't. And every single person on this planet, at the end of the day, is a person too, and has his or her own set of demons and fears that, they're battling every day. And we tend to forget that because all the nonsense, all the noise that we're exposed to constantly, where there's this feeling of there's a barrier between us and everybody else. And to a degree, there is for practical purposes. But at the end of the day, really, we're just all people. And unless, I think what you did, that story you just shared, speaks to something you mentioned at the beginning of this show, which is you don't have a choice about what you do. This is not just a dress you've tried on to see how it fits and how people respond to you in it. This is you. And I think that's what makes it even harder to go ask, because it's like we're ripping open to expose our souls. And that is a very tender, very vulnerable place. But unless we do that, that's what people want. That's what people connect with. That's what people, talk about for years and years and years.
Well, that's something very important that I address a lot when I talk about my songs, because that's what's called authenticity. And that's what people respond to, and people know when you're full of it. And I think that as an artist, when you reach a very authentic place and you get that response from your audience and people connect to your music, that's everything, and if you live your life as an authentic person, I think that you're going to win at every challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are probably one of the most authentic people that I have known. And obviously we've been out of touch for many, many years, but I can still remember back in the day, I have this very clear image of you in my mind from Northport High School. We were in the Commons, and I think it was passing time or it was lunch or something, and you were sitting up on top of one of the banks of lockers. There was those shelves, and you had on your punk boots and you had your short hair, the way you wore it, and you always had a smile on your face, and you were just always very approachable, and very real. And I appreciate that about you, and I appreciate that about anybody really who is true to themselves. And the stories that you have shared today, Emily, about your music, your passion for the creative process, for expressing those universal human truths through your lyrics, through your songs, and also through your children, has been just a delight for me. And as we wrap things up, I would love for you to share the best way for people to connect with you, find your music, listen to your songs, get in touch with you.
Well, they can hear my music either on SoundCloud, which is just soundcloud.com, and you can look for me under M-E-M Duff. People call me M. Or you can look for me on Reverb Nation under the Emily Duff Band, or on Facebook under the Emily Duff Band. And if you're interested in helping out with a fundraising project we're doing for our recording, you can go to GoFundMe. And I think that's just all GoFundMe.com, one word, and look up the Emily Duff Band. And we have a campaign going on right now to make a record. And if you wanted to contribute, that'd be lovely.
Awesome. And listeners, you know that you can find Emily's page, her Shownotes page, at marylukayser.com/Emily. And I encourage you to go listen to her music. If you are so inclined, support her next dream with her band to get a record made, and just get to know her, because as you can tell, she is one amazing woman. So Emily, I want to thank you for your time today, for sharing your stories, for inspiring us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun to talk to you again.
And that's a wrap. Hey team, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. One of the ways that other people can discover this podcast is through ratings and reviews over on iTunes. So if you enjoy this podcast, I would be so appreciative if you took a couple of minutes to head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and then leave me an honest rating and review. Doing that helps to get the word out and allows other people who are looking for inspirational content to find it. Again, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to this podcast, and then leave me a rating and review. Really, really appreciate it. And remember, always a great day to get out there and play your position.
Thanks for listening to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count at marylukayser.com.